I was placing the roast chicken on my dining table when my world shattered into 1,000 pieces. It was Sunday dinner, something we'd done every week since Bradley married Tiffany 2 years ago. I'd set the table with my good china, the set my late husband Thomas had given me for our 25th anniversary. Tiffany was picking at her salad when she suddenly smiled and announced she was pregnant. Before I could even open my mouth to congratulate them, my son Bradley slammed his fist on the table so hard the water glasses shook. He looked straight at me with eyes I didn't recognize and said, "Mom, Tiffany needs the master bedroom. It has the attached bathroom and the most space for the nursery. You need to give her your room and move into the guest room, or pack your bags and leave, tonight." The silence that followed felt like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. I stared at Bradley, this man I'd carried in my body for 9 months, this child I'd raised alone after his father died when he was 12. I searched his face for any sign he was joking, but his jaw was set, his eyes cold. Tiffany sat beside him with her hands folded on the table, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't argue or try to reason with him. Instead, I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor Thomas had installed with his own hands 37 years ago. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my untouched plate, and walked toward my bedroom. "Mom, wait," Bradley called after me, his voice shifting to something that might have been uncertainty. "Don't be dramatic. Just take the guest room. It's not that big a deal." I kept walking. Down the hallway lined with photos of Bradley's childhood, past the bathroom where I'd given him baths and bandaged his scraped knees, into the master bedroom where Thomas and I had slept for 23 years before cancer took him, and where I'd slept alone for the 14 years since. I pulled my suitcase from the closet, the same suitcase Thomas and I had taken on our honeymoon to Niagara Falls. My hands were steady as I began folding clothes. Sensible pants, comfortable shirts, my warm sweater. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Bradley appeared in the doorway, Tiffany right behind him. "You're actually leaving?" Bradley sounded genuinely surprised. "Over a bedroom?" I didn't answer. I moved to my dresser and gathered undergarments, socks. I took the wooden jewelry box Thomas had made me, though the only valuable piece inside was my wedding ring, which I wore on a chain around my neck. I packed my medications from the bathroom, my toothbrush, my face cream. Tiffany leaned against the doorframe. "This is exactly what I told Bradley would happen. You're being selfish and manipulative, making us feel guilty over a simple request." I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She was 28 years old, beautiful in that polished way that comes from expensive hair salons and regular manicures. I'd paid for her wedding dress, $3,000 for silk and lace she'd worn for 6 hours. I'd written a check for $23,000 to cover most of their wedding because Bradley said they couldn't afford the celebration Tiffany dreamed of. I'd given them $15,000 for a down payment on their car when theirs broke down last year. But I said nothing. I just zipped my suitcase and moved to the closet for a second bag. I packed my photo albums, the ones I'd spent hours organizing with pictures of Bradley from birth to graduation. I packed Thomas's favorite flannel shirt that still smelled like him somehow, even after all these years. I packed the Bible my mother had given me, worn from use and marked with notes in the margins. I needed my important documents. I walked past them to my home office, the small room Thomas had used for woodworking plans. Bradley had been using my desk lately for his own work, spreading papers everywhere while I used my laptop at the kitchen table. I was reaching for the file cabinet when something caught my eye. Papers on the desk, partially covered by Bradley's jacket. The letterhead read Whitmore and Associates, Real Estate Law. I moved the jacket aside and my blood turned to ice water in my veins. The document was titled Consultation Summary, Adverse Possession and Property Rights. I read the first paragraph with growing horror. It outlined a strategy for removing an elderly parent from property to establish ownership claim. The consultation was dated 3 months ago. 3 months. They'd been planning this since June. I looked through more papers with shaking hands. Notes in Bradley's handwriting about establishing residency, demonstrating incompetence, and power of attorney options. There was a list of steps, each one checked off. Build relationship and dependence was checked. Increase financial integration was checked. Create urgent need for space was checked. The next item, unchecked, read, initiate, removal. My stomach lurched. The pregnancy announcement, the sudden demand for my bedroom, all of it had been planned, choreographed. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page, my hands trembling so badly I had to take some pictures twice. Then I took the original documents and slid them into my purse. I grabbed my laptop, my external hard drive with all my photos backed up, and my file of important papers. Birth certificate, social security card, insurance policies, the deed to my house. Thank God I'd kept everything in one place. I carried my bags to my car, making 3 trips. Bradley and Tiffany watched from the living room window, probably assuming I'd come back inside, apologize, and agree to move to the guest room. But I didn't go back inside. I climbed into my 10-year-old sedan, started the engine, and drove away from the house Thomas built, where I'd planned to live until I died. I checked into a Hampton Inn off the interstate, paying for 3 nights with my credit card. The room was generic and clean and nothing like home. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself look at the photographs on my phone again. The words blurred through my tears. Remove elderly parent. Establish ownership claim. My own son. My only child. The boy I'd sacrificed everything for. Working 2 jobs after Thomas died to pay for his college. Giving him every advantage I could scrape together. He'd been planning to steal my home. No, worse than that. He'd been researching how to have me legally removed from my own property. I thought about the pregnancy announcement. Was Tiffany even really pregnant? Or was that just part of the manipulation, a way to make me look heartless if I refused their demands? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark hotel room, listening to trucks pass on the interstate, and tried to understand how I'd gotten here. When had Bradley changed? Had it been gradual, or had Tiffany planted ideas in his head from the beginning? I remembered their first date, how excited he'd been. She was sophisticated, educated, everything he thought he wanted. I'd welcomed her with open arms, never suspecting she was measuring my home like a prize she intended to claim. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't go back. I wouldn't go back, but I also couldn't let them win. At 8 o'clock Monday morning, I called Donald Pierce. He'd been Thomas's best friend since high school, stood as best man at our wedding, and was the one who held me when I collapsed at Thomas's funeral. After retiring from his law practice, Donald had moved to a condo across town, but we still met for coffee once a month to remember Thomas and catch up on life. Myra? His voice was warm with concern when he heard my tone. What's wrong? I met him at a diner near his condo and showed him the photographs. I watched his face change as he read, watched his hands clench into fists against the table. Donald was 72 years old, with kind brown eyes and white hair. But in that moment, he looked ready to commit violence. That son of a... He caught himself. Myra, I'm so sorry. This is fraud. This is conspiracy. This is elder abuse. Can they actually do it? I asked. Can they take my house? Donald shook his head slowly. Not legally, no. But that doesn't mean they won't try. People successfully steal property from family members every day through manipulation, forged documents, and abusing legal systems. We need to protect you immediately. He pulled out his phone and made notes. First, we secure your assets. Bank accounts, investments, everything. Make sure Bradley has no access. Do you have any joint accounts with him? No, I said, relief washing over me. Everything is solely in my name. Good. But let's verify that. We'll go to your bank right now. First National Bank opened at 9. I'd been banking there for 41 years, since Thomas and I opened our first joint checking account as newlyweds. The manager, Angela Harris, had known me for 15 years. She smiled when she saw me, but her smile faded when she saw my face. Angela, I need to review all my accounts, I said. All of them. I need to see who has access. She led us to her office and pulled up my information on her computer. Checking account, solely in my name. Credit card, solely in my name. But when she got to my savings account, the one with my life savings, her face went pale. Myra, there's a joint account holder listed here, Bradley Reeves. He was added 4 months ago. The room tilted. That's impossible. I never added him. Angela turned her monitor so I could see. There was my signature on the authorization form, dated June 15th. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close, very close, but the loop on my M was wrong. I always made it larger. This is forged, I said, my voice shaking. I never signed this. Angela's fingers flew over her keyboard. Let me check the transaction history. Her face went even paler. Myra, there was a withdrawal of $12,000 last Wednesday. Bradley Reeves withdrew it. $12,000. Gone. From my savings account that held $147,000, money from Thomas's life insurance, our retirement savings, everything we'd worked for over 34 years of marriage. I want to file a fraud report, I said. Right now. And I want him removed from my account immediately. Angela nodded and began pulling forms. We'll also need to file a police report. This is forgery and theft. Donald put his hand on my shoulder. While Angela handles that, think about this, Myra. Bradley won't take this lying down. When he realizes you've cut off his access, he's going to escalate. You need to leave town. Now. Today. Leave town? I stared at him. Establish residency somewhere else, Donald explained. If you're living out of state, it makes it much harder for him to file fraudulent claims against your property here. And I'll be here to monitor everything. But you need to be somewhere safe, somewhere he can't manipulate you or forge more documents. Where would I even go? Donald leaned forward. Where have you always wanted to live? If you could go anywhere, start fresh, where would it be? I thought about the question. For years, decades really, I dreamed about the ocean. Thomas and I had taken a trip to California for our 20th anniversary, spent a week in a little beach town where we walked on the sand every morning. He'd held my hand and said, "One day, when I retire, let's move somewhere like this." But cancer came before retirement, and the dream died with him. The beach, I whispered. California, the ocean. Then that's where you go, Donald said firmly. We'll find you a place. You buy it, establish residency, and we'll deal with Bradley from a position of strength. While Angela processed the fraud report and account changes, I sat in the bank lobby with Donald's iPad, searching California coastal real estate. My heart raced as I scrolled through listings. Most were far too expensive, over $1 million for tiny cottages. But then I found it. A small beach house in a town called Seaside Cove, 3 hours north of Los Angeles. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 900 square feet. Nothing fancy, but the pictures showed white walls, hardwood floors, and a back deck that faced the ocean. The price was $230,000. Donald, look at this. He studied the listing. It's perfect. Small enough to manage, affordable, and far enough from here that Bradley can't just show up. Call the realtor. I did. The realtor, a woman named Susan Chen, answered on the second ring. I explained I was interested in the property and could come see it immediately. There was surprise in her voice, but she agreed to meet me the next day at 2 o'clock. I changed all my passwords sitting right there in the bank. Email, utilities, insurance, everything. I added 2-factor authentication to every account. Angela helped me set up alerts so I'd be notified of any attempt to access my accounts. Before I left the bank, Donald took my hand. Leave your house keys with me. Put them in a safe deposit box here. Don't give Bradley any way to claim you abandoned the property. I'll check on it regularly. And Myra? Don't tell him where you're going. I booked a flight to Los Angeles for 7 o'clock the next morning. Then I drove past my house one last time. I don't know why. Maybe to say goodbye. Maybe to convince myself this was really happening. There was a moving truck in my driveway, a big U-Haul, the kind you rent for major moves. Bradley and Tiffany were carrying boxes into my house. My house. Through the open front door, I could see them heading toward the master bedroom. They'd already started moving in. 24 hours after demanding I leave, they were claiming my space like they owned it. I took pictures with my phone, photographs of the truck, of them carrying their belongings into my home. Evidence. Then I drove away. That night, in a different hotel closer to the airport, I finally cried. Not quiet tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere primal. I cried for the son I'd lost, for the trust that was shattered, for the home that no longer felt safe. I cried for Thomas, wishing desperately he was here to tell me what to do. I cried until I had nothing left, until my chest ached and my eyes were swollen. Then I got up, washed my face, and packed for California. The flight to Los Angeles was 3.5 hours of turbulence, both literal and emotional. I sat in my economy seat, watching clouds pass below, trying to convince myself I was doing the right thing, running away, starting over, leaving behind everything I'd known for 68 years. Susan Chen met me at the Seaside Cove property at exactly 2 o'clock. She was a petite woman in her 50s with a warm smile and efficient manner. The moment I saw the cottage in person, I fell in love. It was even better than the pictures. The paint was fresh, the floors gleamed, and when Susan opened the back door to show me the deck, the sound of waves filled the air. "It's perfect," I breathed. The ocean stretched out before me, endless and blue and somehow calming. I could picture myself here, drinking morning coffee on this deck, healing in this space. The cottage was small, but I didn't need much. 2 bedrooms meant one for me and one for guests, though I couldn't imagine who those guests would be now. The kitchen was compact with white cabinets and granite counters. The bathroom had been recently renovated. "The seller is motivated," Susan said. "They've already relocated for work. If you're serious, I can get you a very quick closing." "I'll take it," I said. "Cash offer, full asking price." Susan's eyes widened. "You don't want to negotiate or get an inspection?" "I want it," I said firmly. "How fast can we close?" "With a cash offer? 10 days. Maybe less." We went back to Susan's office, and I signed the preliminary paperwork. She explained the closing process, the title search, all the details that suddenly felt overwhelming. But underneath the anxiety was excitement. This would be mine. A fresh start. A new life. I found a small inn 3 blocks from the beach and checked in for 2 weeks. The owner, a friendly woman named Patricia, showed me to a room with lace curtains and a view of the street. It smelled like lavender and old wood, comforting somehow. I unpacked my 2 suitcases and tried to settle in. The first evening, I walked to the beach and took off my shoes, letting the sand and cool water touch my feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Seagulls called overhead. Families packed up their beach gear. A couple walked hand in hand at the water's edge. I stood there until the sun disappeared completely and stars began appearing in the darkening sky. For the first time in days, I felt something like peace. The next 3 days passed in a haze of paperwork and beach walks. I signed documents Susan brought to the inn. I talked to the title company. I got a California driver's license at the DMV, establishing residency. I opened a local bank account and transferred funds. Every step felt like building a wall between me and Bradley, between my old life and this new one. On the 4th morning, I woke to the sound of ocean waves through my open window. The air smelled like salt and something floral from Patricia's garden. I lay in bed, listening to seagulls call, and thought, I could be happy here. I could actually be happy. Then, I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Donald. All between 6 and 7:30 in the morning. My peaceful feeling evaporated. I called him back with shaking hands. "Myra, thank God," Donald answered immediately. "I've been trying to reach you for over an hour. What's wrong?" Bradley filed an elder abuse report with Adult Protective Services. He claims you're mentally unstable, that you have dementia, that you wandered away from home and he's desperate to find you. He's telling everyone you're a danger to yourself. The room spun. That's insane. I'm perfectly healthy. I know that. But he's filed for emergency guardianship, Myra. He's claiming he needs to protect your assets because you're incompetent to manage them. He has affidavits from people saying you've seemed confused lately. If this goes through, he'll control everything. Your house, your money, your medical decisions, everything. He can't do that. That's not legal. It is if a judge believes you're incompetent. There's a hearing scheduled for next Wednesday. You have to be there. If you don't show up, he wins by default. I felt my California dream crumbling around me. But the house closing is Tuesday. If I leave now, Myra, if Bradley gets guardianship, he can cancel that sale. He can take everything. You have to come back and fight this. I closed my eyes. After everything, Bradley was still destroying my life. Just when I thought I'd escaped, he'd found a way to drag me back. I'll book a flight for today, I said, my voice hollow. I had to tell Susan I needed to delay the closing. She was sympathetic but firm. The sellers had another offer, someone willing to close even faster. If I couldn't commit to the Tuesday closing, they'd take the other offer. I understand, I said, even though I didn't. Even though losing this cottage felt like losing the last good thing in my life. I flew back that afternoon, leaving my California peace behind. When I landed, I retrieved my car from airport parking and headed to the lot exit. A police car pulled up behind me with lights flashing. My heart hammered as an officer approached my window. "Ma'am, can I see your license and registration?" "Of course. What's wrong?" "This vehicle was reported stolen." "Stolen? This is my car. It's registered in my name, but it took 2 hours to sort out. Bradley had reported my car stolen, claiming I was mentally incompetent and had taken it without understanding what I was doing. The officers made calls, checked records, grew increasingly skeptical of Bradley's story. Donald showed up with paperwork proving my ownership and medical records showing my perfect health. Finally, they let me go. But I'd missed the appointment with the California closing attorney. Susan called while I was still sitting in the airport parking lot with police. "Myra, I'm so sorry. The sellers accepted the other offer. The house is sold." I sat in my car in the growing darkness and watched my dream disappear like smoke. The cottage by the ocean, the fresh start, all of it gone because my son was determined to destroy me. The competency hearing was held in a cold gray courtroom that smelled like floor polish and anxiety. I sat beside Donald at a table facing the judge, an older woman named Patricia Thornton with steel gray hair and sharp eyes. Across the aisle, Bradley sat with his attorney, a slick young man in an expensive suit. Tiffany was beside Bradley, wearing a modest dress and pearls, playing the role of concerned daughter-in-law. Bradley's attorney stood and presented his case. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Your Honor, we're here today out of genuine concern for Myra Reeves, a woman who has shown increasing signs of cognitive decline over the past year. My client, her loving son, has watched helplessly as his mother has become confused, forgetful, and ultimately a danger to herself. I wanted to scream that it was all lies, but Donald had coached me. Stay calm. Let them present their case. We'd demolish it with facts." The attorney called witnesses. First was a woman named Stephanie Walsh, who claimed to be from my church. I'd never seen her before in my life. She testified that she'd spoken with me several times after services, and I'd seemed confused about the day and didn't remember previous conversations. Then came a man named Gary Porter, who said he'd helped me at the grocery store when I seemed disoriented and couldn't remember what I was shopping for. Another stranger I'd never met. Donald leaned over and whispered, "They're all Tiffany's relatives." I checked. Cousins, friends from her yoga class, all coached. But the judge was writing notes, her face unreadable. Finally, Bradley took the stand. My son, the baby I'd rocked through colicky nights and cheered for at Little League games, looked at the judge with manufactured sadness and said, "I've been worried about Mom for months. She forgets things. She gets confused. Last week, she packed her bags and disappeared without telling anyone where she was going. I've been terrified something would happen to her. Did your mother seem confused when she left? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. She was agitated and not making sense. I tried to calm her down, but she just left. I think she might have early-stage dementia like her mother had. My grandmother had died of Alzheimer's disease when I was 30. It was true, but I was nothing like her. I was sharp, focused, perfectly healthy. Donald stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call for a full psychiatric evaluation. Let's put this to rest with actual medical evidence rather than coached testimony from the petitioner's relatives. Judge Thornton agreed. She ordered a comprehensive evaluation with a court-appointed psychiatrist, Dr. Helen Morrison. The hearing was continued for 2 weeks. Dr. Morrison's office was in a medical building downtown. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. Over 3 hours, she put me through extensive testing. Memory tests, logic puzzles, questions about current events. I answered everything easily, correctly. She asked about my life, my history, my current situation. Tell me about your relationship with your son, she said. I told her everything. The dinner confrontation, the forged documents, the stolen money, the fraudulent police report. I showed her the photographs on my phone. She took notes steadily, her face neutral. Have you ever felt confused or disoriented? She asked. Only once, I admitted. Well, not once. Maybe half a dozen times over the past 6 months. After Sunday dinners at my house, I'd feel foggy, almost drugged. I'd go to bed early and sleep for 12 hours. I thought maybe I was just tired. Dr. Morrison leaned forward. What did you eat and drink at these dinners? Whatever I cooked. Bradley and Tiffany would bring drinks. Tiffany makes these elaborate smoothies with fruit and protein powder. She always insisted I drink one, said I needed more nutrition. Dr. Morrison's pen stopped moving. She made them specially for you? Yes. Bradley and Tiffany drank regular juice or water, but Tiffany always brought a smoothie just for me. The doctor was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Myra, I'm going to order some additional tests, blood work and hair follicle analysis. I'll have the results before our court date. The results came back 4 days before the continued hearing. Donald called me at the studio apartment I'd rented with what was left of my savings, a tiny place above a dry cleaner that smelled like chemicals and disappointment. Myra, sit down, Donald said. I'm already sitting. The talk screen came back. You had traces of diphenhydramine and zolpidem in your system, Benadryl and Ambien, in doses high enough to cause confusion, disorientation, and memory problems. The world tilted. They were drugging me every Sunday for at least 6 months, based on the hair analysis. They were creating evidence of your cognitive decline, making you seem confused so they could use it against you later. I thought I'd already hit bottom. I was wrong. This was bottom. My son had been poisoning me, slowly, methodically, week after week. Watching me struggle through those fog-filled evenings, probably laughing about it later. The continued hearing was packed with observers. Word had spread about the case. Judge Thornton read Dr. Morrison's report aloud, including the toxicology findings. Bradley went pale. Tiffany gripped his hand, her knuckles white. Dr. Morrison, the judge said, what is your professional opinion regarding Mrs. Reeves's mental competence? Dr. Morrison stood. Your Honor, Myra Reeves is one of the most mentally sharp 68-year-olds I've evaluated in my 30 years of practice. She has 0 signs of dementia or cognitive impairment. However, she does have evidence of being systematically drugged, which caused temporary confusion that her son and daughter-in-law deliberately created and documented to support false claims of incompetence. The judge turned to Bradley with a look that could have stripped paint. Mr. Reeves, this court finds your petition for guardianship to be not only without merit, but criminally fraudulent. The evidence suggests elder abuse, fraud, and potentially assault. I'm dismissing this case and referring the matter to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Bradley and his attorney jumped up, talking over each other. The judge banged her gavel. Furthermore, Judge Thornton continued. I'm ordering a restraining order. Mr. Reeves and Mrs. Tiffany Reeves are to stay at least 500 feet away from Mrs. Myra Reeves at all times. Your Honor, Bradley's attorney said desperately, there's one more matter. Mrs. Tiffany Reeves is pregnant. Surely the court won't. Is there medical documentation of this pregnancy? The judge interrupted. The attorney shuffled papers. Mrs. Reeves stated she's pregnant. For the court record, we should have... Then get it, Judge Thornton snapped. This court requires evidence, not convenient claims. Mrs. Tiffany Reeves, are you willing to provide medical proof of pregnancy? Tiffany stood up, her face red. I don't have to prove anything to. Yes or no, the judge said coldly. The courtroom was silent. Tiffany looked at Bradley, then at the judge. There is no pregnancy, she finally said. It was a misunderstanding. The gasp from the courtroom observers was audible. The judge closed her folder with a sharp snap. A misunderstanding. How convenient. This hearing is concluded. Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, you will comply with the restraining order immediately. Mrs. Myra Reeves, you have this court's apologies for what you've endured. I sat there, numb. The pregnancy had been a lie. All of it, from the beginning, had been a calculated manipulation. They'd probably planned the fake pregnancy announcement for months, knowing it would make me look heartless for refusing to give up my bedroom for a non-existent grandchild. Outside the courtroom, Donald hugged me. You won, Myra. It's over. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like I'd survived a war but lost everything in the process. Bradley and Tiffany walked past us to their car, not looking at me. The restraining order meant they couldn't speak to me, couldn't come near me. My son was legally ordered to stay away from me. That night, Donald called with more bad news. The California cottage sold. Susan tried to reach you during the hearing, but you couldn't answer. She said the buyer's closed today. I'm sorry, Myra. I hung up and sat in my studio apartment, listening to the dry cleaner's machines rumble below, breathing in chemical fumes. My beach house dream was gone. My relationship with my son was destroyed. I was living in a grim apartment, sleeping on a borrowed air mattress, because I couldn't afford furniture yet. I'd won in court, but I'd lost everything that mattered. The restraining order required Bradley and Tiffany to vacate my house, but that didn't happen immediately. The process took time. Paperwork, court orders, legal procedures. Donald filed for formal eviction, and the court granted it with a 30-day notice to vacate. 30 more days of them living in my home while I lived above a dry cleaner. I couldn't afford to not work, so I got a job at Henderson's Books, a small independent bookstore 3 blocks from my apartment. The owner, Martha Henderson, was a kind woman in her 70s, who asked no questions when I filled out the application. She just looked at my face and said, "You look like someone who needs a quiet place to heal. The job is yours." The work was simple: organizing shelves, helping customers, running the register, minimum wage, 20 hours a week. It was enough to cover my rent and groceries, barely. My savings were depleting fast. The studio apartment cost $850 a month plus utilities. First month, last month, and security deposit had taken nearly $3,000 of my remaining funds. I walked to work because gas was expensive. I bought store-brand groceries and ate simple meals. I learned what it meant to count every dollar, something I hadn't experienced since Thomas and I were young and struggling, except now I was 68 and I was alone. The days crawled by. 28 days, 29 days, just 2 more days until the eviction would be enforced and I could go home. I'd already arranged for a cleaning company and contractors to assess the damage. Insurance would cover most of it, the agent had assured me. I could move back in while repairs were being done. On day 29, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was Patricia Chen, my neighbor who'd lived 2 houses down for 30 years. Patricia who'd brought me casseroles after Thomas died, who'd watered my plants when I traveled, who'd waved to me every morning from her garden. "Myra," she said, her voice tight with distress. "You need to come to your house right now. Something's wrong. There's smoke, and I hear crashing sounds." I called the police. I threw on clothes and ran the 12 blocks to my house, my heart pounding. Donald met me there, arriving at the same time. 3 police cars were already parked in front. The officers were trying to get inside, but Bradley had changed the locks. Through the windows, I could see smoke. Not fire smoke, but thick clouds like from smoke bombs. And I could hear crashes, the sound of destruction. "Break the door down!" I screamed at the officers. "That's my house! They're destroying my house!" It took 20 minutes to get inside. When the door finally gave way, I pushed past the officers and stopped dead in the living room. The destruction was systematic and complete. Every wall was spray-painted with obscenities, black and red paint everywhere, dripping down to pool on Thomas's hardwood floors. The furniture was smashed. My couch, shredded with a knife. The coffee table, broken into pieces. Picture frames were shattered on the floor, photos of Thomas and me torn into pieces. The kitchen was worse. Every cabinet door was ripped off its hinges. The countertop was cracked. The appliances were dented and broken. Someone had poured paint down the kitchen sink. I walked like a zombie through my home. In the master bedroom, holes had been punched in every wall. My mattress was slashed, the stuffing pulled out. My dresser drawers were broken. Someone had spray-painted, "This is ours," now, across the wall. The bathroom mirror was smashed. The toilet was cracked. They'd poured concrete mix down the shower drain. But the worst was Thomas's workshop in the garage. His tools, the ones he'd collected over 40 years, were scattered and destroyed. His workbench was burned. The wooden projects he'd never finished, including a rocking chair he'd been making for our future grandchild, were smashed to pieces. I fell to my knees in the sawdust and debris, picking up the broken pieces of the rocking chair, and something inside me finally broke. I sobbed, deep, wrenching sounds I couldn't control. The police officers looked away, uncomfortable. Donald tried to help me up, but I couldn't move. Everything was gone. Not just damaged, destroyed with malicious intent. A police officer approached Donald. "Sir, the perpetrators left a note." He handed over a piece of paper. Donald read it and his face went white. He showed it to me, in Bradley's handwriting. "You wanted us out? Fine, but you'll never have this house back the way it was. We made improvements to add value to OUR investment. See you in court." "Improvements?" I whispered. "They destroyed everything. They're claiming the damage is improvements," Donald explained, his voice shaking with rage. "They've filed a legal claim that because they started renovations for a nursery, they have a right to compensation for those improvements. They're trying to claim squatters' rights, saying they have equity in the property now. Can they do that? They're trying. It's completely fraudulent, but it means the eviction is on hold again until a judge rules on their motion. It could take weeks." I looked around at my destroyed home. Weeks. More weeks of them here, or rather, their legal claim being here. And I had nowhere to go because I couldn't move back into this disaster. A contractor arrived and walked through with me, taking notes and photos. His estimate for repairs was $83,000. $83,000 to fix what Bradley and Tiffany had destroyed in pure malice. "Insurance will cover most of this," the contractor said. "Vandalism is covered in your policy, but it'll take 4 to 6 months to repair everything." 4 to 6 months. Half a year before my home would be livable again. I couldn't afford to pay rent and cover the insurance deductible and eat. My savings were almost gone. I was working part-time at a bookstore. I was 68 years old, and I was being destroyed by my own child. That night, I sat in my studio apartment and looked through the photos on my phone. The destruction, the broken furniture, Thomas's smashed rocking chair. I scrolled back further to the pictures of the California cottage, the one that got away, the deck facing the ocean, the white walls, the promise of peace. I looked at my bank account on my phone. $78,000 left. Enough to survive on for a while, but not enough to repair my house and live. Not enough for anything except maybe a few more months of this grim existence. I pulled up the photo of Thomas on my phone, the one I'd taken on our last anniversary before he got sick. He was smiling at the camera, his arm around me, both of us happy. I touched his face on the screen. "I don't know what to do," I whispered to the photo. "I don't know how to fix this. I'm so tired, Thomas. I'm so tired of fighting." For the first time since he died, I felt truly alone. More alone than the night he passed away in hospice, because then I'd had Bradley. My son had held me while I cried, promised he'd take care of me, sworn we'd get through it together. That Bradley was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who'd drugged me and stolen from me and destroyed the home his father built. I was at the absolute bottom, with nowhere left to fall. I woke up on day 30 with sun streaming through my studio apartment window, and something shifted inside me. I'd spent 68 years being kind, being giving, being the good mother, the supportive parent, the one who sacrificed so others could thrive. And where had it gotten me? To this studio apartment that smelled like dry cleaning fluid, with $78,000 between me and complete ruin, and a son who'd rather destroy me than love me. No more. I called Donald at 7 in the morning. "I need a private investigator. The best one you know." There was a pause. Then, "Now you're talking. I'll have someone at your place by noon." Frank Sullivan arrived at 11:45. He was a stocky man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. He listened to my whole story without interrupting, taking notes on a small pad. When I finished, he nodded. "I've seen cases like this before. Adult children trying to financially abuse elderly parents. It's more common than people realize. The good news is, people this desperate usually have a trail of bad decisions behind them. Let me dig." 3 days later, Frank came back with a folder 2 inches thick. We met at Donald's condo, spreading papers across his dining room table. What Frank had found made my blood run cold, then hot with rage. "Let's start with the basics," Frank said. "Bradley and Tiffany haven't paid rent anywhere in almost 3 years. Their last apartment they stopped paying 11 months before moving in with you. The landlord has a judgment against them for $19,200 in unpaid rent and damages." He slid over a court document. I stared at the numbers. "They have 17 credit cards between them," Frank continued. "Every single one is maxed out. Total debt across all cards is $73,416. They make minimum payments sporadically, when they can, but they're drowning." More documents. Credit card statements with balances in red, past due notices, collection letters. Tiffany has filed bankruptcy 3 times, twice in her 20s, once right before she married Bradley. She has a pattern of accumulating debt, filing bankruptcy, and starting over. Bradley's co-signed for most of her current debt. "My son doesn't have that kind of money," I said. "He works at a tech company, makes decent money, but not enough for this. That's because they're living beyond their means. Way beyond. Look at this." Frank pulled out more papers. Tiffany's Instagram shows designer purses, expensive dinners, luxury vacations, all paid for with credit cards they can't afford. They've been playing a shell game, using new cards to pay minimums on old cards, but it's collapsing. I looked at printouts from social media. Photos of Tiffany with handbags that cost thousands of dollars. Bradley and Tiffany at expensive restaurants. A trip to Hawaii I'd thought Bradley's company paid for. "Here's where it gets worse," Frank said. "Bradley took out 5 payday loans using your address. Total of $12,100. Those loans have interest rates over 300%. He's being sued by 4 different lenders. There are garnishment orders against his wages." Donald swore under his breath. "They were about to lose everything." "They had lost everything," Frank corrected. "They were facing homelessness, multiple lawsuits, garnished wages, ruined credit. Then Bradley saw an opportunity. His mother, living alone in a house worth at least $500,000, with savings and life insurance money. They weren't just trying to live with you. They were planning to take everything." I thought about the forged bank documents, the adverse possession research, the systematic drugging. It all made horrible sense now. They hadn't targeted me out of casual cruelty. This was desperation combined with greed. There's one more thing, Frank said quietly. Tiffany is still legally married to someone else. I stared at him. What? Her divorce from her second husband was never finalized. The paperwork was filed but never completed. Technically, her marriage to Bradley isn't legal. She's committed bigamy. Donald leaned back in his chair. That changes everything. Myra, we have them. Fraud, elder abuse, forgery, theft, and now bigamy. And we can prove they were motivated by crushing debt. This isn't just civil court anymore. This is serious criminal exposure. We filed everything with the court the next day. Copies of the credit card statements, the unpaid rent judgments, the payday loans, the marriage certificate showing Tiffany's uncompleted divorce. We presented evidence of their systematic plan to steal my assets to cover their debts. The hearing was swift. Judge Thornton reviewed the evidence with a face like granite. She called Bradley and Tiffany's attorney to the bench. The conversation lasted 15 minutes, and when the attorney returned to his table, he looked sick. Judge Thornton's ruling was comprehensive and brutal. Bradley and Tiffany had 24 hours to vacate my property, enforced by police escort. They were liable for all damages to my home, plus punitive damages for the systematic abuse. The total judgment was $215,347. That includes repair costs, Mrs. Reeves's legal fees, compensation for her emotional distress, and punitive damages for the egregious nature of your actions, the judge said. And I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. What you've done here isn't just civil fraud. It's criminal elder abuse, and it carries potential prison time. Bradley and Tiffany sat frozen. They had no way to pay that judgment. They were already drowning in debt. This would destroy them financially for decades. I felt no satisfaction, just numbness and exhaustion. That afternoon, as I was leaving the courthouse, my phone rang. It was Susan Chen, the California realtor. Myra, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, she said. But something's happened you need to know about. Remember the cottage you wanted to buy? The one that sold? Yes, I said tiredly. The sale fell through. The buyers couldn't get financing after all. And the sellers heard about your situation from me. They feel terrible about what happened. They have a new offer, but they're willing to give you first right of refusal. Myra, there's another property too. It just came on the market this morning. It's better than the first cottage. 3 bedrooms, 1,500 square feet, 1 block from the ocean. The owner passed away, and his daughter is selling it fully furnished. She wants a quick sale to settle the estate. My heart started to beat faster. How much? She's asking $250,000, but I think she'd take $230,000. And Myra? She said if you're interested, she'll hold it for you for 2 weeks. She knows you're dealing with family issues. Her own father dealt with something similar with his son before he died. She said she doesn't want to see another elder lose their dream because of an ungrateful child. I looked at Donald, who'd been listening. He nodded. Tell her yes, I said. I'll take it. The police escort to remove Bradley and Tiffany from my house happened on a gray Thursday morning. I stood on the sidewalk with Donald and Patricia as officers supervised the removal of Bradley's and Tiffany's belongings. They came out carrying boxes and suitcases, their faces blank. Tiffany was crying. Bradley looked straight ahead, refusing to meet my eyes. They loaded everything into Bradley's car, which I noticed had a crack in the windshield and a dented bumper. The car that I'd helped them buy, that still had $12,000 left on the loan, a loan they probably weren't paying anymore. When the car pulled away from the curb, Patricia took my hand and squeezed it. Good riddance, she said firmly. I walked through my house with the contractor and insurance adjuster. The damage seemed even worse in the harsh light of morning. Every room told a story of malice and destruction. The adjuster took photos and measurements and assured me everything would be covered minus my $3,000 deductible. The repairs will take 5 months, minimum, the contractor said. Maybe 6. The hardwood floors need to be completely replaced. The drywall in every room needs to be torn out and redone. The kitchen is a total gut job. The electrical system was damaged. "This is major work, Mrs. Reeves." I looked around at the house Thomas had built, where we'd raised our son, where I'd thought I'd die someday, and I realized I didn't want to stay. Not anymore. Too much pain had soaked into these walls. This wasn't home anymore. It was a crime scene, a monument to betrayal. "I'm selling it," I told Donald that afternoon. "I can't live here again. I don't want to." "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "I've never been more sure of anything." We listed the house as is, damaged and all. I expected it to sit on the market for months. Instead, a developer called 2 days later. He wanted to buy the property, tear down the house, and build a new one to sell. He offered $490,000, cash, closing in 3 weeks. It was $70,000 less than the house was worth in perfect condition. But I didn't care. I accepted immediately. Donald helped me negotiate paying off the remaining mortgage, which was only $63,000. After that, the closing costs, and my legal fees, I cleared $401,000 from the sale. Combined with what remained of my savings, I had $479,000. More than enough for the California house and a comfortable cushion for the future. The 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and packing. I donated most of my furniture. It was all damaged anyway, and I didn't want to bring pieces of this life into my new one. I kept only Thomas's photo, my photo albums, his flannel shirt, and a few personal items. Everything else went to charity or the dump. On closing day, I signed the papers and handed over the keys to my house. Then I immediately signed the papers for the California house, wiring $230,000 to Susan Chen's title company. The house was mine, fully furnished, move-in ready, 1 block from the Pacific Ocean. I flew to California that same afternoon with just my 2 suitcases. Susan met me at the house with the keys. It was even more beautiful than the photos. 3 bedrooms with hardwood floors throughout. A kitchen with white cabinets and new appliances. A living room with big windows facing the street. And a back deck, larger than I'd imagined, that looked out at the ocean. The sound of waves was constant, soothing. "The furniture is all included," Susan said, showing me around. The daughter said her father bought everything new 5 years ago when he moved here after his wife died. He wanted a fresh start. I understood that feeling in my bones. That first night, I sat on the deck wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun set over the Pacific. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, just like it had that first evening weeks ago when I'd thought I'd lost this dream forever, but I hadn't lost it. I just had to fight harder than I'd ever imagined to reach it. Over the next weeks, I settled in. I unpacked my few belongings and arranged Thomas's photo on my new bedroom dresser. I bought groceries at the local market, where the checkers learned my name. I joined the library and checked out books about California coastal plants. I walked on the beach every single morning, my feet in the cold Pacific water, watching pelicans dive for fish. I got occasional updates from Donald. Bradley and Tiffany filed for bankruptcy, but the court judgment against them wasn't dischargeable because it was for willful and malicious injury. They'd be paying it off for the rest of their lives, probably through wage garnishments and tax refund seizures. Their creditors had caught up with them. Multiple lawsuits were pending. They'd moved into a rundown studio apartment in the worst part of town, the only place they could afford. Bradley had lost his job when the criminal charges became public. His company had a zero-tolerance policy for fraud and abuse. Tiffany's legal husband had found them and was demanding spousal support she couldn't pay. She was facing her own criminal charges for bigamy. The legal system was crushing them slowly but thoroughly. 3 months after I moved to California, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from Bradley. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "Mom," it read, "I know I don't deserve anything from you. I know what we did was unforgivable, but we're facing eviction again. Tiffany is sick and we can't afford her medicine. I'm begging you. I'm your son. Please help us. Just a few $1,000s to get through this month. I promise we'll pay you back." I read the letter 3 times, sitting on my deck with coffee cooling in my mug. I thought about the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers. The teenager who'd held my hand at Thomas's funeral and promised we'd be okay. The man who'd drugged me and forged my signature and destroyed my home. I tore the letter into tiny pieces and let the ocean breeze carry them away. I'd spent 37 years sacrificing everything for Bradley, giving him whatever he wanted, supporting him through every difficulty, enabling his poor choices because that's what mothers do. But I'd finally learned the hard lesson. You can't pour from an empty cup. I'd emptied myself completely, and Bradley had only wanted to take more. Some people say you should always forgive family, but forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone continue to hurt you. Forgiveness doesn't mean funding their destruction or your own. I forgave Bradley silently, in my heart, not for him but to free myself from the bitterness that would poison my new life. But I wouldn't forget, and I wouldn't enable him anymore. I'd learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation. Real family is defined by love, respect, and mutual care. My real family now was Donald, who called me every Sunday just to chat. Patricia from my old neighborhood, who'd driven 6 hours to visit me and walked the beach by my side. Martha Henderson from the bookstore, who sent me care packages with books and tea. Susan Chin, who'd fought to give me this house, and now checked in regularly to make sure I was settling in okay. These people, who had no biological obligation to care about me, who chose to love me anyway, they were my family now. I was 68 years old and I'd started completely over. I had a cozy house by the ocean, enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, and freedom I'd never known before. I'd started painting, something I'd always wanted to try. I'd joined a book club with 6 other women who met monthly and talked about everything except their ungrateful children. I'd started dating a kind widower named George, who ran the local bait shop and made me laugh with his terrible jokes. One evening, 4 months after moving in, I was sitting on my deck watching dolphins swim parallel to the shore when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Reeves? This is Detective Amanda Walsh with the District Attorney's Office. I'm calling about the criminal case against Bradley Reeves and Tiffany Walsh. They've both accepted plea deals. Bradley will serve 18 months in county jail for elder abuse and fraud. Tiffany will serve 2 years for her role, plus additional time for the bigamy charge. They'll both be on probation for 5 years after release. I thought you'd want to know." After I hung up, I sat very still, watching the sun disappear into the ocean. Justice had been served, as completely as it ever is. Bradley would go to prison. Not for long enough, maybe, but enough to understand that actions have consequences. Enough to lose everything he'd been trying to steal from me. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad for the little boy who'd become a man I didn't recognize. Sad for all the wasted years of our relationship. Sad that it had come to this. But underneath the sadness was something else. Something that felt like peace. Like I'd survived a war and could finally rest. I whispered to the sunset, to Thomas wherever he was. I finally did it. I chose myself. I chose my peace over his comfort. I walked away from the toxicity, even though it wore your son's face. And you know what? I think you'd be proud. The wind picked up, warm and salt-scented, and somewhere in it I felt like Thomas was answering, "Of course I'm proud. You were always stronger than you knew. Now live, Myra. Really live." So that's what I did. I woke up every morning to the sound of ocean waves. I walked barefoot on the beach and collected shells. I painted terrible watercolors that made me happy. I laughed with new friends over coffee. I held George's hand as we watched sunsets. I read books and tended a garden and learned what it meant to live for myself instead of for someone else's needs. Starting over at 68 wasn't easy, but it was possible. And it was worth it. I'd lost my son, but I'd found myself. I'd lost my old house, but I'd gained a home. I'd lost my illusions about family, but I'd gained the wisdom to recognize real love when I saw it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from toxicity, even when it wears the face of family. Self-respect isn't selfish. Choosing your peace over someone else's comfort isn't cruel. and starting over is never too late. Real love respects boundaries. Real family honors your humanity. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find yourself. I'm 68 years old, and for the first time in my life, I'm truly free. I'm living in my beach house, watching the ocean, and choosing myself every single day. And it feels like finally coming home. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because staying was destroying you? Have you struggled with setting boundaries with family members who didn't respect you? How did you find the courage to choose yourself? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's facing a similar situation right now. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you that it's never too late to start over, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about resilience, survival, and the courage it takes to rebuild your life. And please share this with anyone who needs to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that no matter how old you are, no matter how trapped you feel, there's always a way forward. There's always hope, and there's always the possibility of a new beginning if you're brave enough to reach for it. May you all find the courage to choose your peace, the strength to set your boundaries, and the wisdom to recognize the people who truly love you. Take care of yourselves, and remember that you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, especially by the people who claim to love you. Until next time, may you wake up to your own version of ocean waves and know that you made the right choice.